So let me share my screen. Let's go through our housekeeping slides here for a second. And obviously Zoom is behaving a little differently than Teams, which is what I'm used to. So today we have an Angela Chi of Ennead present her BIM environment. She has, for the last couple of months since she switched to Ennead, developed a BIM ecosystem for the company, and with the existing BIM and technology experts over there. And I'm really excited to hear this. I hear it's a little bit not cooked, which is even more exciting for me. You know, as a chef, I like to look into other people's kitchens and see what kind of magic they're cooking up. So Angela, thank you for being here. Come on screen, there we go. Our sponsors are currently not providing food, but we want to shout out to them anyway. Microsoft, Imaginate, AEC Resource, and Consulting for Architects is still supporting us behind the scenes. Our space providers will eventually come back to us, or rather we will get back to them. Today, we're getting AIA credits. Oh, and I forgot to, Ilkay, I'm sorry. We're getting AIA credits today, courtesy of Microsoft Resources. So if you need AIA credits, send an email to marketing@microsoftresources.com. The email comes back later. The webcast is not provided by Hunt today. It's provided by Ilkay's Gen X. My apologies for that. I didn't switch that over. Other support is coming from Spatial Ops, Arcad, AEC Resource, although they paid for a microphone that we're currently not using, and our friends at the CSI Metro chapter. I've been talking a lot here. James is back today, our President Emeritus and founder. Leonard was on last week. He'll be back in 2 weeks from now. Ilkay of Gen X, as I said, is very supportive with our technology. Ian is currently helping set up a couple of events. Robert is hopefully writing some things for us, and Alfred, as usual, is helping us with the posting online and the conversion and all that type of fun stuff. On September 9th, we will have an absolutely stellar panel consisting of Charlie Portelli, Leonard Anderson, and Phil Bernstein, all three very accomplished practitioners and teachers. They will focus on their academic work and what they are up to for the upcoming year. A couple of weeks ago, we had a meeting of how to teach in this pandemic world. Now we want to get back to what is BIM. What can we accomplish in terms of BIM? There's a couple of really interesting things. Charlie has 2 PhD students he's working with, and Leonard is studying modular construction in his construction management group for the homeless, and they want to study how to convert old unused hotels into housing for the homeless. So join us for that. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. We're still trying to set up the September product showcase with Fenestra Pro. It might switch into October. We're not quite sure yet. We're sorting that out. In October, we have our collaboration with the Thornton Tomasetti Tech Symposium. I've just sent out the notification about that. We will not have a dedicated event like we had last year where we all gathered together, but the Revit Users membership here at the Revit Users Group will receive a discount. If you want to sign up for that symposium, reach out to us, drop us a line in the meetup chat, and we'll get you the discount code. They actually have split this up into really interesting small bites, so you can pick and choose which pieces you want. It's really affordable this year. And then later on, we're looking at another product showcase on Clarity, probably presented by Populous, We want to compare different rendering engines. We're still working on that, and hopefully some downstream BIM collaboration on big hybrid projects. Peers will hopefully do that for us. And as usual, if you have ideas, let us know. If you have ideas, things that are iffy for you, things that don't work out, things you want to learn more about, let us know. Ask us. We will try and find you the right expert and see if we can make a presentation for that. If you have anything snazzy like Angela, volunteer. This group is by users for users. This is all depending on you guys and your guys' input. So please reach out to us. I can sit here in front of my screen and talk to it all day long. This is only valuable if you tell us what your value is, right? So with that, we're gonna skip who is present. That doesn't work. But again, marketing at Microsoft Resources. If you need AAA credits, drop them in a line. And I'll turn this over to Angela. As most of you have heard me say before, I really despise reading the bio and the academic accolades of the speaker. We can read. We have read that. Excellent speaker. They're rock stars. That's why we're here, right? Nobody wants to hear those accolades. It's boring. Angela and I met here at the Revit user group a couple of years ago. She's been coming regularly. Turns out she's married to a German guy who likes motorcycles. And that's not me, even though I'm the German guy who likes motorcycles. But we have been talking about visiting each other and like having dinner together, but we never managed. And now we're not permitted anymore, but we will get that done. So that is the personal introduction. All the accolades and whatnot you've read. I'll turn this over to Angela. I'll stop sharing my screen and you can share yours.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, so when I go into full screen mode, I just want to make sure that hold on there. Sorry, I'm having a moment here. I'm trying to. Sorry, one moment. I have to figure out how to share my screen.
We were seeing it just fine.
Oh.
Just a second ago.
Yeah, I know, but it's not full screen. I'm trying to get full screen. It's right here. Sorry. I'm on his Mac, which is why I'm horribly confused because I don't use Mac. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Okay. And when I go into full screen. Okay, I'm in full screen. Oh, no, you can't see the full screen. All right. I guess it'll be not full screen.
Big enough.
It's big enough. Okay.
Hey, full screen? Full screen.
Yeah, but no, they can't see it. You can see it? Okay. Everyone can see this? Okay.
Not anymore. We were seeing it for a second. It was way big enough.
This here, let's see. Oh, I am so not a Mac user. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. All right. All right. I think we're ready to go now. Okay. So, welcome everyone. Yeah, so as Andre said, my name is Angela. I'm a BIM manager at Ennead. I'm very excited today to share with you what we've been working on at Ennead. I first talked to Andre about this. I wanted to give the presentation next March, at which point we would have been about 1 year into our current endeavor. But with COVID hitting us and Andre's considerable powers of persuasion, I agreed to give this talk today. So we are currently only about 3 months in on a multi-year process. And I'll tell you right off the bat that it is very much a work in progress. But we hope that, as Andre suggests, this will be a good opportunity to garner some feedback, get some ideas, suggestions from you guys. Okay, so real quick before getting into all of this, since apparently this is an AI accredited presentation, by the end of this talk, you should have our take on what is a BIM ecosystem and who is the architect of the future, building buy-in for organizational change, how to build a common language, and how to create an infrastructure for successful implementation. So just a little bit about Ennead. Ennead was formerly Pulsec and moved to a partner-based model in 2010, at which point it became, as it is known now, Ennead. Our projects are generally focused around public spaces, but are varied in typology. We've got cultural, medical, higher education, just to name a few. Some of our projects here, like the Standard Hotel, the new Town Creek Eggs and Greenpoint, those are pretty familiar to New Yorkers. We have a new planetarium currently under construction in Shanghai. The NYU Kimmel Center is here, and just for a little variety, we've got a science and engineering laboratory for Stanford University. So we recently relocated from the meatpacking district to the 40th floor of the World Trade Center, and we are about 225 people in the New York office and 25 in the Shanghai office. So more qualitatively, Ennead is a firm that really believes in the idea of the generalist architect. Our office isn't split into studios the way other firms are, in order to allow for a greater amount of mobility for everyone and to give people the opportunity to work on all different project types that we have. Another thing about Ennead that I absolutely love is that it's a learning economy. Everyone is very curious, very open, and we're also really given a lot of time to learn. We even have a classroom in our new office, which I use a lot. So, well, not right now, I guess, but when we're there. So this is applied computing. So just a bit of history about our department. It started in 2004 and it consisted of Revit and CAD support. They developed a library and a template and a bunch of standards, but the general approach to the office was reactionary. Brian, who is our director, I'll just point him out, he's here tonight. He joined at a very opportune moment about 5 years ago and really transformed our department into what it is now, where we drive the process rather than the other way around. So we're 4 people. There's 3 of us who are BIM managers, and then we've got Alan, our computational designer. Everybody is an architect in training, and we've all worked on project teams at various stages of design. We all love process, and it's what drives us. A little quote that we are always repeating is, the project is the byproduct of the process. So that's the motto that we get from our director of operations. So what am I here to share about Ennead? It's been a really great over the past couple of months, listening to panel discussions on BIM and academia, because what we're working on right now within our office is very educational in nature. We're building what we're calling a BIM ecosystem, which we expect is going to take a couple years to take into fruition, to come into fruition. So what exactly do I mean by a BIM ecosystem? So if you do a quick Google search, you're going to come up with a parametric monkey blog post from Paul Wintour and a chapter from Building Information Modeling, BIM in Current and Future Practice, which is quoted here on the screen. Both sources essentially state that the successful implementation of BIM requires three things to be in alignment: products, processes, and people, which we think of more like tools, workflows, and people. So what this is saying is that the three parts need to be equally developed in order for everything to actually work. You have to have the tools that can do the work. Each tool is better for some things than others, but they all need to connect somehow. So that's where we develop workflows. But then you need for people to be able to understand and use these tools and workflows. Paul's post is mostly about software and workflow. And it does a really good job explaining how different types of software can fit together. My talk today focuses a lot more on how we're fitting all three pieces together. So what kind of infrastructure can be put in place, and how do we get the people involved to buy in? So part of the fun of developing an ecosystem is that everything is so interdependent and intertwined. It's really hard to tell the story in a linear fashion. So I'm going to do my best to tell you several of the more linear trajectories and how they all combine in the end to form a larger picture. So this is the big picture. There's a lot of arrows that are pointing to the one box in the middle. It's not an action, it's a role. So this person is called the super user. There's a really great book on it by Randy Deutsch. It's a really great read. I highly recommend it. When you read it, you can pat yourself on the back a few times when you self-identify. But essentially what Randy is describing in this book is the architect of the future. So quoting him here, this is a person who is a combination of hard and soft skills. They're design professionals who leverage tools and technology to do more with the people skills to accomplish all they do with and by the means of others. They're specialists with interpersonal intelligence. I think the big reason for this book, and he actually says it, is the need to highlight this particular type of person. Because when it comes to the BIM ecosystem, our industry as a whole has yet to bring people into alignment with the other two pieces. This architect of the future, the super user, is instrumental in making everything happen. So you'll see as I walk through our various paths of conjecture that we always end up at this role. So looking at this misalignment, we've targeted several reasons as to why people aren't completely in alignment yet. So lack of familiarity, major shift in the thought processes that accompany the tools and workflows, and the glass ceiling. So just diving into the lack of familiarity, it's not just about not knowing how to use the tools very well. In a lot of cases, people simply don't know that there are tools or workflows that do certain things, or they might know about them, but completely misunderstand how they work or what they're for. It's actually a lot more common than you would think. There's a lot of reasons we theorized as to why this could be happening. Lack of scope. People don't go looking for a solution until they can perceive that there's a problem. Often there's a lack of resources or knowing where to look. And then there's also just that people don't have a lot of free headspace to be learning new things. We're all on deadlines. We've got a million things on our list to do. So a lot of times the last thing you want to do is explore what kind of tools there are that are available. So we started addressing this with some infrastructure, a really good information distribution chain. In our case, all our programs are available for installation on our IT self-service portal, which is, there, the central portal. So it's like looking through an a la carte menu. We also have an Office wiki that's under documentation. So this summarizes programs, plugins, all our workflows and how they relate to each other. And of course, we've got different training, right, at all the different scales, formalities. And then we also have all the internet posts. So we do tip of the days, we do updates. So we try to constantly put things in people's faces and hope that it'll kind of initiate some interest. So, we've got a wonderful set of resources that we're imposing on people. We're just bombarding them. For some people, this is effective. For a lot of people, it's actually very overwhelming, or they're so busy they don't even notice. Only creating resources and having postings and trainings, it's not fully effective because they're actually all passive resources. You have to make them, you make them available, but it's still something that people have to go to look for. Having these things in place, it's more about building a library so that when it occurs to people to ask questions, you can direct them to one of these for a quick response. The hard part is getting people to actually ask the questions, which leads us to social interaction. So this is more effective for getting people on board with trying new tools and learning best practice. It's effective because it's active. So we're here, let's talk. I'm asking questions that require answers. You ask questions and you get an immediate response. Introducing a series of required meetings for project teams creates an opportunity for our department to be able to check in periodically. Sitting with the team and hearing about the challenges of the moment is a good chance to peddle a few tools and workflows to a team. We also send out periodic surveys to the office. For example, an annual self-reported proficiency survey, which provides the office an opportunity for some self-reflection. Usually gets us a handful of people asking questions like, well, what is that program? What can I do with it? So of course, our department is 4 people for 250 people. So that means that we can't have these social encounters with the regularity that would be effective. As I mentioned earlier, people don't go looking for solutions unless they perceive there's a problem. So teams with less knowledge of the tools and their possibilities may not identify problems that can be solved. So these 2 reasons highlight the importance of having a super user on each team. In our case, we started with the BIM lead role. This person is a production member of the team who's a strong Revit user. Usually it's somebody who everyone is going to for help, which in turn leads them to generally know what everybody's working on. I'm sure everyone has people like this in their office. So in the context of growing familiarity on the teams with our tools and workflows, the BIM lead is pivotal because there are department's means of scaling our efforts and getting solid feedback. So we began by clearly defining this role as someone who's overseeing the digital health of the project by QA/QCing and by mentoring teammates, and then adding on some official office-wide responsibilities like representing our department's knowledge base. But once we began this, we realized that BIM doesn't actually just begin with the Revit model. We needed similar types of roles in earlier phases too, since we're always working in a digital environment. So from there, we grew this role to include computational design leads, and eventually they all fell under this umbrella role in our office that we're calling the ACE. So the ACE is our embodiment of the super user. There's somebody who manages the digital environment of the project from start to end. It's a leadership role that's kind of like a job captain. So we're seeing them as someone who mentors, who connects the team's work to the rest of the office, and is a catalyst for systems thinking. So we back up the ACE role with a clear set of responsibilities and core competencies, focusing on familiarity with the pieces of our ecosystem and a mindset based around systems thinking and process. So for example, considering the whole, beginning the end with the end in mind, and building connections. So qualifications wise, we actually prioritize years of architectural experience because this role requires the scope developed over those years. The understanding of the work is really necessary to be thinking fully systemically. Software expertise is also included because in order to be effective in this role, conceptual understanding is not sufficient. The ACE has to be somebody who is an operator of the tools. It's just slightly less important because this person is mostly about managing process. So for ACEs, the buy-in has really, our goal has been to get them to lean in and embrace their roles to the fullest. So the first 2 months have been spent supporting the rollout of their role. We've had multiple meetings with senior leadership and with all of the ACEs to discuss the role and its implications. Announcements, we've given announcements on the internet. We've had office-wide meetings where the partner told everybody about this role. So the formalization of it is really meant to empower the ACEs and give them a seat at the leadership table. We're encouraging discussions between the parties. So we tell them, like, read the responsibilities document and then get together. So like the project architect, project manager, project designer, and the ACE, like, sit together and talk about what this role means for their project and hash it out right up front. So, nobody is surprised. And then from the senior leadership side, we've been asking for them to really understand what that role is and then follow through by having expectations for this person. So by having expectations, in a way, they're actually giving permission to the ACEs to be able to do their thing. So monthly meetings, applied computing, we meet with the ACEs and anyone who's actually interested in working towards being one. So it's really whoever wants to join can join. So we meet with them on a monthly basis where we're keeping them up to date with our developments, to do some training and to give important reminders like make sure you publish your model on BIM 360. We're working on some of our meetings to make them a little more fun, to get people a little more engaged. So one of the things that we're throwing around as an idea is some short assigned reading, like we're thinking about Jeanette Wing's computational thinking article, and then having a little discussion group, maybe about computational versus systems thinking. Are they different? Apples and oranges, so that's something that we're working on. So moving on to the next barrier in alignment, shift in thinking. So, obviously the way we've worked has rapidly changed over the past few decades. We went from hand drafting to computerization, and that was from 2D to 3D. And now we've been doing computation in BIM, and it all happened in the past 30 years. So what's significant about this is that not only have the tools changed, but the thought process behind producing in them, and also the concept of ownership. So hand drafting and 2D drafting is largely linear approaches. But with BIM, it's a systemic approach. You need to really understand the totality of what you're trying to accomplish and then build up the framework for it, and then use things like filters to pull out information in targeted digestible formats. So hand in hand with a change from linear to systems thinking is a revision on the concept of ownership. So your drawing is no longer your own because it's just a slice of the whole. More and more of our programs also are requiring that everybody's working together. So it's been actually really encouraging for me to hear how much teaching BIM has changed in the universities. So one of the issues that I've encountered while working through the years is that a lot of people don't really understand how important how you do the work is. So, their work is no longer their own. It translates into other people's drawings. And the way that they accomplish the work is also affecting their teammates. I think it actually starts at school where everyone's working on their own projects, or even on group projects where, you only have your own piece. It didn't matter how sloppy your file was, so long as the end product looked good. It was never mentioned, at least during my schooling, that one day we'd all have to work in the same file together and that digital hygiene would be more important. So for a lot of people, I think it's a very alien or even just plain alienating concept. So once we enter the office, particularly if you're getting into Revit, it becomes really important to conform your workflows and be able to negotiate with your teammates on how you're going to work in that file together. So having to build that buy-in with people can be really tough depending on office culture. And I think just mentioning the idea of it in school can make it feel a little less alien invasion and maybe a little more like the joy of building something together. I had to put that in, yeah. So within a project team, these shifts have different implications for different roles, and there are various ways that we're handling them. So for the most part, we've been spending time building buy-in with senior leadership. Most of senior leadership, they don't have a background in computers, and it's really unlikely that they're gonna get into our day-to-day softwares, but they're in charge of staffing and scheduling. So how do you get a group of people where a bunch of them may not be so computer literate to make the right decisions? So rather than trying to teach them how to use all the tools and workflows, we've been focusing on having a high level understanding of these mindsets. So the easiest part is to create some concrete organizational tools, right? These management tools. So for example, an org chart for assigning responsibilities in a Revit-based project team. So in this example here, so traditionally team members are assigned sheets, right? But it's really not that simple. If you think about the A100 series, for example, it's got a little bit of everything. It's got your walls, doors, stairs. The reality is that the drawing is a combination of other people's work. The stairs are probably modeled by someone else. The curtain wall is also modeled by someone else. Maybe somebody is the owner of the theater or the lobby. So just assigning sheets is insufficient. You really need to assign something like scope as well. So the lobby or the theater, or all the doors and all the walls. And what we did was we also created accompanying diagrams to understand how sheet and scope relate to each other. And then we also have something here for mapping out skill level required for each type of sheet or scope, since it's not necessarily intuitive. So my favorite example to give is slab edge plans. They're graphically very simple, so one would think that it's a great opportunity for a beginner Revit user. But the reality is that you have to be really comfortable in Revit in order to work on them because of all the coordination that needs to happen. So as we said before, providing tools like this, it's passive, so we got to get active. Our office has a monthly senior leadership meeting. So our department co-opted it for the year with the partners' blessings. So in these meetings, we push digital proficiency mainly by working on building a common language centered around systems thinking and bringing awareness to process-based issues around our deliverables. We make it a point not to use words like parameter and algorithm until they're defined. The goal of these talks is to untangle the jargon that causes ambiguity. An example is this month's meeting, where we took ideas from typical elementary school software programming classes, where they have these 4 terms: decomposition, abstraction, pattern recognition, and algorithm. So we defined these for everyone, and then we showed how that process can be applied to an everyday architectural problem. It was actually a really successful, exciting conversation. So number 3 is about building complicity. So the BIM ecosystem, it doesn't begin and end with software. Software is only a part of it. So a big part of building the ecosystem is understanding the system of our work, agnostic of computation. We have many members of our senior leadership being led by our Director of Operations, Omar, currently involved in a very deep investigation of really understanding the system behind our deliverables. We've got a few task forces, and each of them are examining the deliverables from different angles. So there's some that are breaking up by design phase. Some are just looking at our design process. We have one group that's looking at the start to finish process behind specifications. And then we've got a couple of people looking into like contracts and BIM uses. So we're all involved. So number 4 is about augmentation of leadership. So as we said, our senior leadership is working towards a higher level of understanding of computation, but most likely they won't become software experts. So that highlights a bit of a gap in the leadership circle. This really, it's serendipitously combined with one of Omar's system studies. And it produced this diagram here. So we come back to our super user, our ACE. So this is the conversation we had with senior leadership. We basically described the ACE similar to what I said before. They manage the project's digital environment. So there's someone who needs to fit into that leadership circle as a modern day job captain. A big part of gaining buy-in for this role, which I might not have made so clear earlier, is that for senior leadership, this role really is about developing the future architect. So by buying in, it also means they're cultivating the future leaders of our firm. So the relationship is two ways. The ACE is kind of their technological interpreter, but at the same time, the ACE is really benefiting from being involved in leadership so they can learn how to become the project architect, designer, or manager one day. So with the rest of the office, building buy-in and shifting thinking actually leads to the last barrier in alignment, which is the glass ceiling. I'm sure you've met a bunch of people along the way that say, I don't want to be that Revit person. I don't want to get pigeonholed. Or maybe when you're trying to figure out who's going to be the BIM lead on the team, it's a game of hot potato because people don't want that role. They're like, oh, I don't want to be the Revit janitor or the computer chauffeur. And in some cases, people just don't have any interest in learning software. It's this inconvenient thing for them that they have to use in order to get to the end result. So our perception is that this all boils down to a fear from people on what career path comes from specializing in technology. Being a BIM lead it's a lot of work, it's thankless, and generally there's been no recognition of the amount of leadership it requires to be a BIM lead. So what kind of prospects would this person have? Can someone who's the Revit guy become a partner one day? Or are they just going to be seen as a computer person only? Because how can someone possibly be both good at computers and be a good architect? So that really brings us back to the role of the ACE. We've been working on a bit of a contradictory but complementary strategy for building office buy-in. So we're messaging to the office a despecialization of specialization, in that being facile with programs and workflows should be as ubiquitous to our industry as something like sketching and model building. Everyone in the future will be a super user, and they'll be really good at learning, understanding, and using software and workflows. It's something that we should all be working towards. And there's not going to be any pigeonholing because everyone's just going to be equally good one day, maybe. The other side of the strategy is to incentivize the digital process through the ACE role. It used to be that as a young person, if you want to move up the ladder, the conversation really quickly turns into, well, do you want to be a PA or a PM or a designer? Because you kind of have to choose now because that's going to define your path. And it can be a little bit scary sometimes because you're not really ready to lock into a path yet. So this is actually a great path because it doesn't make you have to choose, because it's a leadership role that's focused around systems thinking. It's about process and tools. But to get to be this person, you actually have to build proficiency in order to meet the qualifications. So with all of the conversations that have been happening with the groups and the teams, this role actually has become pretty desirable for any young person who's interested in moving into leadership one day. We actually had a project manager the other day grumbling a little bit because there's people apparently fighting over who wanted to be the ACE on their team, which is awesome. Like that's what we want. Well, maybe not the fighting, but still. So our plan for the next few years is to continue to improve upon our tools, processes, and documentation to try and lower the barrier to entry. But we're also going to keep working on the stakeholders in our office in order to build proficiency and reframe how we're doing our work so they can meet us halfway. So closing thought is that, well, as you can see, this talk was largely focused around the people portion of the BIM ecosystem. It's the hardest part of the equation. People are hard. Like, we all have different backgrounds, different priorities, different ways of thinking, learning, and doing. And maybe that's why throughout our industry, it's the part that is the most behind. We feel like it's not something we can ignore. So until we bring people into alignment, we won't as an industry truly be BIM. So that is why we're focusing on the people first. And that's pretty much it. This is where we're at.
Excellent. Let me see if my sound back on. My video. I think so.
Yes.
All right, beautiful. Thank you so much. And yes, Angela was right. I leaned into her quite hard to see this, and she kept saying, "Well, when we're done, when we're done." I'm like, "No, I don't want to see the product. We're architects. We want to see each other's sketches." I think this was incredibly informative to see how you make this people-centric, rather than just, throw a bunch of acronyms and, insect names on the wall and call it software package. So let's have a look, guys. I see we're getting some, usually people are posting their questions as they come along during the meeting. Right now, everybody is posting questions right now. So let me have a look here. How would that translate to a small practice? I mean, you're not really an econ big, but you're also not,
Right.
Single practitioner or sole practitioner or 5-10 people.
Right.
So how do you see that scale down in this case?
It's tough. I
we
mean,
talked a lot about scaling up.
being a lone BIM manager is rough, like really rough. And I think you just really have to prioritize. Like, I would think build your information distribution chain first, and like as soon as possible, and then just spend the rest of the time tackling people. Yeah, I know like budget is always an issue, or even like being able to get everyone together in a room once a month can be really rough when it's a small office. But I think part of that buy-in is, you got to start at the top, like start with the partners, show, don't tell. Like if they don't necessarily understand how awesome computation is and how much time it can save, maybe embed yourself on a team and show them the magic, and make sure that you follow up with a very concise presentation and say, this is what we did, and this is how we got there, and this is what I can do to get you there. And hopefully that'll at least get a little bit of time, like every month, in order to be able to work with everyone. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. We got some really good feedback. I see Pierce is around. Pierce, if you've missed that earlier, I'm still having you on the hook for later this year for a presentation. Kevin is asking, do you see the ACE turning into the PA of the future, i.e. going back to a three-team project leadership instead of 4, as you are showing right now?
Yeah, that's something that we've been tossing around back and forth in our own group, just trying to understand the future of the ACE. I mean, honestly, I think the ACE is the job captain. We've been having teams where they've been trying to combine ACE with project architect. And I think on smaller jobs, since you just don't have that many people, that's the way of it. And, you know, if it's smaller, it's less complex. You may not need so many roles. But on large projects, I don't think the ACE is ever going to go away. I think that it's going to normalize in a way where it is just going to turn into the job captain. And it's going to just be a requirement that you have to be really, really proficient at least one type of software and to have that mindset. But yeah, as it is now, there are some teams that already have like PA and job captain. So I think that structure is going to continue. Just maybe not as glorified.
What size teams are you running when you're saying maybe smaller teams? What would be your team breakdown?
Well, I'd say like, I mean, if you have a 4-person project, you just don't have that many people. And you don't really need quite, like the ACE is kind of like an air traffic controller, you know, where you've got all these people doing different things. And, you know, when you've got 4 people, it's pretty easy to just turn around and talk to each other and work it out. But once you start to get into like 8 people, maybe even 6 people, you know, where it's so large that like I could be completely unaware of the work that somebody else is doing, then you really need to have somebody in that role who everyone is kind of coming to. And that person is going to be, I think of it as like kind of a vessel for all of that information. Like maybe like Joe is saying, hey, I need to put this type of floor on this work set and that type of floor on that work set. So there's this filter, and then someone starts messing with it. And I'll be like, hey, you need to negotiate this with Joe. So as soon as that kind of stuff happens, I think the ACE has to be a defined role that is separate from everything else.
Okay, excellent. I'll skip over to Sam for the moment. I need to read the first question that came in. How much experience with programming would an ACE ideally have?
Oh, actual computer programming? So we don't ask them to be able to program. We give them the opportunity to learn how to do things like Grasshopper and Dynamo, so they can join in on classes. But our applied computing group, we're the ones who make the Dynamo scripts. We do want for people to be able to create their own Grasshopper scripts, since a lot of these tend to be really unique situations. But that's really as far as it goes. I think if there's special nodes that people want made, they can talk to our department. So I don't have this diagram included in our presentation, but we have this kind of thinking where only 5% of our office actually needs to be able to do the programming, and then maybe and then the rest of the office can kind of work with it with varying degrees of proficiency and additional skill.
Okay, Toussaint is getting to the generational change that's happening between leadership and the digital natives versus the digital immigrants. So is this setting up of a ecosystem enabled by that generational change? How does that pan out, given that I guess your leadership, just like mine, is probably not good with computers, right? Then
Yeah.
there's a couple of digital natives like you and I. We had to get into that the hard way, and then there's the next generation of we're the digital immigrants, and then there's the digital natives now following us and hopefully holding our feet to the fire. How does that play into the ecosystem and the setup and the projections?
Not really sure I understand. I'm rereading the question myself. And this idea of identifying the technology. I mean, the generation hasn't changed out yet. We still have a lot of non-natives that are in leadership positions. I think that one thing that's really great about Ennead is that the partners are really aware, and they're like constantly reading up on what the latest is of everything, and they could see the direction that everything is going in. So for them, it was pretty easy to make the connection that this was something that needed to happen. Yeah, as for the generational change, I'm not sure. I think it's really just about the mindset, because there's people who graduated the same time I did who still don't get computers. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. You know, if that's your experience, then that's the response here. All right, excellent. I think this was absolutely beautiful. Guys, do you have any other questions? If you do, type them up. There's something very impressive.
Brian,
Yeah,
no. The systems effect. Well, Brian, you can talk about it.
I'm okay with that, Brian. If you just want to unmute yourself, that is totally okay here. We would usually just hand you a mic.
Excellent.
No, Angela, I really want you to talk about that. This is your presentation, but I just mean how we're basically putting ideas out to a large group and community of super users, and that's really what this presentation was about, right? So how do you begin to seed ideas to this community of super users, and can you see the benefit that is given by computation through all the different teams at Ennead?
Yeah, we're kind of working with a trickle, I guess it's kind of a trickle down effect that we're hoping for, where we're focusing a little more attention on these people who have indicated an interest in technology, and what they're doing is that they're bringing back the ideas. For example, at our monthly meetings, we're talking about plugins, or we're talking about something a little more theoretical like computational thinking, or introducing, this is like building the common language. Like I've got this whole spiel on Revit with tool understanding, like, is it global or local? Is it 2D or 3D? Is it scalable or annotative? Like, can you make these differentiations? And so what they do is they take these ideas and then they bring it back. And when they're helping someone with a question, then they also start to, it's almost like templating the way that they're thinking and the way that they're solving problems. So if they're also teaching somebody, they might also think about the way that we've been teaching them and say, hey, are you trying to do this as a global action or a local action? You know, and hopefully that can permeate throughout. Like, we just can't be there for everyone. So having people participate in this is extremely important.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say that Angela has really been spearheading this movement and has created that direct line of communication between what we're doing in applied computing out to the entire office. And, you know, the point of the question was that we've been getting such great feedback from the office just as a whole. And it's almost like a self-reinforcing feedback loop where we're able to now understand different needs that we may not have anticipated, that are making our work better, that causes us to create new standards or new processes that then get out to the office. And then once it's out in, you know, the land of the project, right, we begin to get new ideas and can kind of, you know, change the way that we're working, which has all been really exciting. So this was a great talk, Angela. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. One question, this is maybe more my own kind of rant. A lot of what you do is very categorized, right? It's very rational in buckets that are here and there, and then you categorize them, and like a lot of things, you know, they belong into two categories, and so you have subcategories and you connect things. Do you find that when you're trying to explain this, you lose people just by like, oh my God, I don't want to listen to you explaining these thought processes and these logical lines? And if so, how do you tackle that just on an interpersonal level?
Oh, I just gave this spiel to an intern the other day. It's all about the storytelling. I put things into, I actually start with a giant tangle, and then I take a long time to put them into buckets, because I think for some people the tangle works and for other people the buckets work. But the biggest thing is to be able to tell the story, and that took me a really long time, especially for this, since everything was so tangled, to find the right approach. You know, it's kind of like we're in third grade, you learn how to write an essay. Start by telling everyone what you want to do, then spend the next 3 paragraphs or however long backing it all up. And then at the end, tell them over again what it is that you're trying to say. So,
all right, fair enough. Excellent. I think the chat is dying down. If anybody still has some questions, type them up. Other than that, I think this was a beautiful event. At peak load, we had just about 60 people, 57, 58 or so, something like that.
a lot.
So, yep, really popular. Everybody was very curious about what you had to say. And the feedback so far has been excellent. So thank you so much, Angela, for you know, having us have a look into your kitchen. I'm pretty sure in about a year or year and a half, I will come back at you and to have a look at the finished meal.
Yeah.
And see what that looks like. I'm moderately sure that there's a lot of people who might be interested in that also. Other than that, folks, that's it for the day. We're meeting again on September 9th with Phil, Charlie, and Lennart about what they're doing in academic research, what their ambitions and goals are for the year. And I'm really looking forward to that as our year of BIM in academia keeps going. Thank you, Angela. Usually I'd ask you out for a beer, but we'll have to do that another time. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.